Shalom. Today's message is called The Plan of Salvation Part 2, The Deeper Meaning of Shalom. If you have not listened to Part 1, I really encourage you to go do that first because I'm building on scriptural interpretation and scriptural meanings and a kind of a more Hebraic way of understanding the scriptures than those in traditional Christianity would do. While this message will stand on its own, you can just continue listening. A lot of the things I reference will make more sense if you go back and get the foundational stuff in Part 1. So diving right into that, the plan of salvation is actually given as a prophecy through the holy days of Leviticus 23. So you see, if you haven't listened to Part 1, where I explain how that works, that is kind of a new way of thinking for most of Christianity. But Leviticus 23, from a very, very big overview, establishes a culture for the nation of Israel, and it expects the nation to be at complete shalom, at complete peace on a national level in order to observe the days. If you imagine working for 6 days and stopping on the 7th every week, and everybody doing exactly the same thing, that expects there to be no calamities, no wars, no invasions, no thefts, no murders. You could just stop working because everybody is living in a peaceful society. The same thing with the annual holy days. And we look at Leviticus 23, traditional Christianity will look at it as just a bunch of days to observe that were done away with. But that's not what it establishes. It's much, much deeper than that because it establishes an entire culture where people are expected to leave all their belongings 3 times a year and go to Jerusalem or go to wherever the tent of meeting was. You can't do that if your nation is surrounded by marauders, and you can't do that if your nation is filled with murderers and thieves and ne'er-do-wells. So you have to have peace, and that's inherent in the holy days of Leviticus 23 is established on Yahweh protecting an entire nation, allowing them to live the way he wants to live. So the pure meaning of the word shalom is peace, but it has so much more depth to it than that, and we're really going to talk about that today as the holy days are a display of faith about something that will be done, about prophecy, and they walk through these days without even knowing, because as we learned in the previous message, you know how the Passover foreshadowed the death of Yeshua, and first fruits foreshadowed his resurrection. Pentecost or Shavuot is the day that the Holy Spirit was given. So for most of the people who observed these days, they are literally true, but they also have this prophetic and spiritual application, and all of that is explained in the previous message that you can get on firstcenturychristianity.net, or if you prefer Rumble or Spotify or wherever this stuff is posted. So what we're talking about here, though, is a culture and a world that is very far away from where we live today. We observe these days today as because we long for them. We long for this peaceful nation with a common morality and common senses of decency where everybody's on the same page, and we can actually, stop locking our doors all the time and leave our kids' toys outside on the lawn. I mean, we're so far removed from this that we don't even we would be weirded out to actually do such a thing in most of the cities of the United States and the West today. What we're trying to do is get a glimpse of the kingdom by observing these days and understanding that these days will be kept in the millennium. We're doing these things to get closer to Yahweh and his Son, and I'm explaining more and more of the depth to it to give us a richer meaning and understanding of Scripture. So in Shalom, this peace is so ingrained in Hebraic culture, in Israel culture, Jewish culture, whatever you want to call it. When you meet somebody and you want to ask how they're doing, you say Ma Shlomha, which is what's your peace? That's what you're asking literally, is what's your peace? What is your shalom? You're asking them how they're doing from top to bottom, from middle. How is your subconscious? How are you thinking? How are you feeling? How is your peace? How is your being? And the response is Shalom Hitov, or Shalom Hama. It could be bad, Ra. It could be Shalom Hara if you're not feeling good. But Shalom Hitov means my peace is good. But it means much more than how you're doing. It's got a ton of meanings. So today, to really explain Shalom, let us look at what happened when the sixth day of creation was completed. When that was done, Yahweh worked. He started with chaos, and he started with chaos, and he formed the heavens and the earth. He formed the land. He formed the creatures. He formed mankind. And when he was done, everything was perfect. Everything was perfect. I want you to imagine being in that garden or the meadow with where Adam and Eve were dwelling. And imagine it being a perfect 75 degrees Fahrenheit. No breeze or a little breeze, a pond, a very perfect pond with water so clear that you can see straight to the bottom, and there's no trash at the bottom. There's nothing growing that's not supposed to be there. The fish are perfect. The sky is perfect. The birds are perfect. The insects are perfect. You're petting a lion. There's a lion snuggled up to you as you sit there in this perfect day on the seventh day of creation. The planet is in a perfect orbit around the sun. The galaxy is perfect. There is nothing wrong anywhere ever. I don't believe that it will only happen that way for maybe once or twice, because shortly after the creation we see the fall. And what happens with the fall, right? Well, we'll get to that in a little bit, because this peace, just close your eyes and imagine it. Perfect grass, perfect animals, perfect fish, perfect everything. Just you and your wife or you and your husband just sitting there and enjoying it with Yahweh. It would be bliss. Today we get a glimpse of that peace in our own lives. When we tune up a car, or we build something at home, or when we work on a large project at work, or maybe if you just bake a cake or you make a dish that tastes exactly how you expected it to taste or even better. When you work on these things, you're supposed to. We're made in the image of God. God is a builder and a planner, and he loves to accomplish things and then appreciate his work, which is what he did on the seventh day of creation. It's what we get to do in the seventh day every week. As we go about our lives and our chores and our building and our doing and our experiencing, everything is so busy and hustle bustle, but then Shabbat comes on Friday at sunset and everything stops, and then we get together with our friends on Shabbat and we enjoy a meal together and fellowship with Yahweh, looking forward to the kingdom. But if you get back to Genesis and we're back in that meadow, the moment that Eve decided to listen to the serpent, the shalom was broken. It was no longer perfect. From that moment, we have been in a fallen condition. The meadow is broken. Imagine somebody takes a pebble off the beach. Yahweh put the pebble on the beach of the pond, exactly where he wanted it. Somebody takes that pebble and they drop it into the middle of the pond. As it sinks to the bottom, it does not belong in the pond. You've introduced something into this perfect pond that wasn't supposed to be there. And the ripples, which normally subside after you skip a rock into a pond, they don't subside this time. They get bigger and bigger and bigger. And the piece is broken. And those ripples turn into a flood, which destroys the meadow and rips the trees up. And now the environment is broken, and the fish's environment is messed up, and the meadow is messed up, and the animals are running because the animals didn't know what to do to run. And so this is the opposite of peace is chaos, not knowing what to expect when things happen that aren't supposed to happen. So the sin that Eve did spread to Adam, spread to all mankind, and ultimately resulted in a flood that destroyed the entire planet and will result in the final destruction and recreation of the planet at the end of days. So the way to understand shalom is to look at the opposite of shalom, which is chaos and sin and violence and unexpected things happening. When you have peace, you have predictability. When you have chaos, you have death and you have misery. So how does this relate to the holy days of Leviticus 23? Well, individually and literally, they are true. Each day has a purpose that it fulfills. And this is something we have to accept, that Yahweh instituted these observances with literal purpose, and they did exactly what they were supposed to do. When the people observed these days, it gave glory to Yahweh, and as part of the Torah, it allowed for a peaceful and prosperous society. Since we live in the culture we do, we don't quite understand these days. And we look back to the history prior to the Messiah, we often think that the system didn't work. We get this notion in our head that somehow the Torah was a lesser thing, that was flawed or whatever, but it was flawed. The flaw was the people. When the people did observe it, it worked. It's unfortunate that it was a very, very minute amount of time that the people actually did what they were supposed to do. And the most clear representation of it that I was talking about in another message is in the book of Maccabees, which is not scripture, but it's apocryphal scripture, where it describes a period of time after the Jews expelled the Greeks from Judea, about 200 years before Yeshua was born, where they did live in peace because they actually did what they were supposed to do. But the amount of times that that's actually happened is so few and far between. And we think that the holy days or the Torah was set up so that the Jews could fail and then Yeshua could come and put an end to it, but that's not true. The Torah is the way we're supposed to live today. The Sabbath honors creation. It marks a weekly cycle. It allows for a break. It allows for us to rest. Provides for a day for holding religious gathering. The day has functioned as designed from inception. Passover week provided a commemoration of what happened in Exodus 12 and the subsequent chapters. The observance did exactly what it was intended to do, and it does exactly what it's intended to do today for those of us who observe. They all did what they were designed to do when used properly. You understand that's peace. If you use a wrench to turn a bolt, you have peace. If you use a wrench to smash a nail, you don't have exactly what's designed to do. And if you leave the thing broken and don't use the tool at all, you're in a worse state than all the above. Today we long for the time where we can observe the holy days properly, and not in an Old Testament context. Just to be clear, the Messiah has come, and he did. There is a change in the Torah. Hebrews records this. There's a change, but not a nullification. So we have to be careful with that. The whole of the holy days were meant to reflect a culture of shalom, a nation at peace. This is a very high-level view of the holy days, but if you imagine, again, imagine Israel actually doing it. Imagine the entire nation being about their business until Friday evening, and then everything stopping, and on Saturday you see some people moseying over to synagogue, or they're all moseying over to somebody's house to observe Shabbat. Imagine year after year you see the people on the first day of the first month, springtime has come, and there's a trumpet, and then 10 days later all the men go get a lamb, and then 4 days later you smell the smell of roasted lamb for the entire nation. And then the next day you see everybody at rest, and then 7 days later they're at rest again. They've changed their diet. Roughly 50 days from the first observance, you see everybody streaming into the temple to bring their offerings. And then you have summer, where everybody's about the hustle and bustle, just keeping the weekly Shabbat. And then first day of the 7th month in the fall, you have an observance of trumpets, and everybody ceases work. And then 10 days later, you have Yom Kippur, where everybody stops. It's as peaceful as you've ever seen. And then a few days later, you have Sukkot, where it's a big party, where everybody goes to Jerusalem to party in the name of Yahweh. Imagine Yahweh looking down from above and just watching this well-oiled machine operate exactly as he designed it. Did you ever think about it that way? Did you ever think about our faith being displayed as works, being an acceptable offering to Yahweh, that he would look down and look at his children doing exactly what they are supposed to do, exactly when they were supposed to do, and enjoying the function of it? Because the function of these days is true. It would have been a wonderful thing. And 3 times a year, when all the men stop what they were doing, they come to the country's capital, they leave all their possessions behind, and land, and they make these pilgrimage, there would be shalom. They would have to harvest their crops, put them in barns and put them in silos, and then bring the best of it to Jerusalem, which is many days' journey. All their stuff is ripe to be stolen. If all the war-aged men are centrally located away from their stuff, they cannot defend the land. And if people stayed behind and stole it, there's nothing they could do about it. So people doing what they were doing week after year put their faith in Yahweh. A lot of Christianity looks at these days as being worksy, like you're trying to save yourself by works, but you're enjoying salvation when you observe them. You're enjoying the protection of Yahweh, that nobody's going to come and steal your stuff while you make the pilgrimage. And what we see from a helicopter view, we see a nation at peace. We see families at peace with children doing what they're supposed to do, and a prosperous nation with no enemies. This would be national shalom. It would be wonderful if our nation would just get back to some semblance of morality. And I bet we'd be blessed for it by getting back to some semblance of normalcy. But in this vein, that these things mirror the Exodus. So if you think about how vulnerable the Hebrews were when they left Egypt, and they got chased to the Red Sea by Pharaoh's army, and then the sea swallowed up the Pharaoh's army and allowed the Hebrews to pass. And for 39 years, they had to completely rely on Yahweh to feed them. So these annual observances are a microcosm of Yahweh taking care of his people and guiding them where they're supposed to be. So in Isaiah 65, 17 through 25, for behold, I create a new heavens and a new earth, and the former things will not be remembered or come to mind. But be glad and rejoice forever in what I create. For behold, I create Jerusalem for rejoicing and her people for gladness. I will also rejoice in Jerusalem and be glad in my people, and there will no longer be heard in her the voice of weeping or the sound of crying. No longer will there be in it an infant who lives but a few days, or an old man who does not live out his days, for the youth will die at the age of 100. And the one who does not reach the age of 100 will be thought accursed. They will build houses and inhabit them. They will also plant vineyards and eat their fruit. They will not build and another inhabit. They will not plant and another eat. For as the lifetime of a tree, so will be the days of my people. And my chosen ones will wear out the work of their hands. They will not labor in vain or bear children for calamity, for they are the offspring of those blessed by Yahweh, and their descendants with them. It will also come to pass that before they call, I will answer, and while they are still speaking, I will hear. The wolf and the lamb will graze together, and the lion will eat straw like the ox, and the dust will be the serpent's food. They will do no evil or harm in all my holy mountain. This is that peace I'm talking about. We understand this to be a future state. This is talking about a period of time where society is perfectly peaceful. Or even the animals will be back to what they were doing prior to the fall. Living in peace, and the world will be in balance. In Revelation 21, 1 through 7, then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth passed away. Remember that part. There's no longer any sea, and I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, made ready as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, behold, the tabernacle of God is among men, and he will dwell among them, and they shall be his people, and God himself will be among them, and he will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will no longer be any death, there will no longer be any mourning or crying or pain. The first things have passed away. And he who sits on the throne said, behold, I am making all things new. And he said, write, for these words are faithful and true. And then he said to me, it is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. I will give to the one who thirsts from the spring of the water of life without cost. He who overcomes will inherit these things, and I will be his God, and he will be my son. So this is the holy days represent an ideal culture and something we're looking forward to, long to experience. At some point, the real Jerusalem will descend from heaven and Yahweh will tabernacle with us just like he did in the garden. There won't be any death, there won't be any pain, there won't be any sorrow. This is the goal. A perfect society for eternity. What is missing from this perfect society? Revelation 21:22-23, I saw no temple in it, for the Lord God the Almighty and the Lamb are its temple, and the city has no need for the sun or of the moon to shine on it, for the glory of God is illuminated, and its lamp is the Lamb. The temple is missing, and the clock is missing. If you recall in the previous message, I explained how the holy days are observed based upon the sun, the moon, the stars, and agriculture. That's a clock. We're going to live in a time of perpetual daytime. We're not going to have an evening. We're not going to have the clock. We're going to have a new heavens and a new earth. So the method of reckoning time will not be necessary anymore. Sin will be gone and perfect shalom will be back. Only this time it will last. This time we will enter eternity. We will enter into an everlasting day that never goes away. Now let me explain something to you now that'll make a lot more sense to you than it did about 25 minutes ago. And Yeshua says in Matthew 5:17-18, do not think I came to abolish the law or the prophets. I did not come to abolish, but to fulfill. For truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not the smallest letter or stroke of the law shall pass from the law until all is accomplished. We just talked about when heaven and earth is going to pass away. When the new heavens and the new earth are created, the heavenly Jerusalem is on earth, and we no longer have evening and morning. We no longer have weeks. We no longer have months. That is when the Torah will be completely fulfilled and no longer necessary. Whenever I speak, the opportunity presents itself. I like to teach by tying things together that believers already know. You know this verse, you may even know it by heart. Mainstream Christianity thinks the Torah was done away with at the cross. It was not. We know exactly when the Torah is going to be fulfilled or done, or we can move to the next level. And that is after all sin is defeated, Satan is defeated, those who are going to be saved and enter eternity do that. When we enter eternity, we're not going to need the holy days. We're not going to need the Torah because there's no more sin. It will be perfection. We can clearly see when all is accomplished. This isn't just some Hebrew idiom here. At the end of the age, the present heaven and earth are here to do a job. They're here to provide structure for how we are to live during this world, called the Olam Hazeh, this world, today's world. Olam Haba, the world to come, is better and different and more perfect. It's perfect, literally perfect. Time won't be marked by the sun and the moon and the stars anymore. And we look forward to the day when we get to experience this pure shalom in the New Jerusalem with Yeshua, where everything is perfect. And I just want you to imagine that you're back in that meadow, and Yeshua reaches down into the pond and picks up that rock and puts it right back where it's supposed to be. When everything is perfect, the animals are perfect, the people are perfect, the climate is perfect, the water is perfect, the fish are perfect. This is where we're going with this. We're going for the plan of salvation, and this is what salvation looks like. It looks like a place where we put so much trust in Yahweh that we do whatever he says until we enter that kingdom and we get the new heavens and new earth, where our oneness with Yahweh and his Son will reach such a point that we won't even know what sin is anymore. We won't know what imperfection is. We will enter into eternity and into perfect shalom. Thank you so much for listening. For more messages like this, please stop by firstcenturychristianity.net. It's the best place to get it all because it's in written, audio, and video format. And if you sign up for the weekly newsletters, you can be up to date when any teachings come out. These are also available on Spotify and Rumble and most of the alternative media these days. Really appreciate your support. If you feel moved, you can donate at firstcenturychristianity.net to support the ministry, because we are a 501c3 official church that does help people who believe like us to keep the holy days. We do practice what we preach. May Yahweh bless you and keep you. May he make his face shine upon you and be glorious to you. May he lift up his countenance upon you and give you shalom. In the name of his son Yeshua. Thank you.